My father, a man with calloused hands and a soul as simple as the rural town where he raised me, always said I had the mind of a shark. He didn't say it with pride, but with a weary resignation, as if he knew that one day my ambitions would swallow everything we had. And he was right. I am a shark. I left that dusty town in rural Ohio the day I turned 18, with nothing but a bus ticket and a venomous certainty that I would never be like them. In a few years, I built a small empire in the tech world. I am a senior software engineer at a prominent company in San Francisco, with a salary that would make my old neighbors' heads spin. My apartment on the 30th floor has a panoramic view of the city, where the lights twinkle like a million tiny victories. Each expensive piece of furniture, each designer dress in my closet, is a trophy in the war against the poverty and naivety I left behind. My parents, they're an anchor I've been dragging for years. My father, a good-for-nothing plumber who never learned to charge what he was worth. My mother, a sweet woman with a heart too big for her own good, who always believed in family above all else. Their latest folly, deciding to finally have the wedding they couldn't afford when they were young. They've been married for 25 years in the eyes of God, but not on paper. And now, they want a celebration with all the trimmings. The problem? They blew their entire savings on a bad investment, a scam my father fell for online. Now they're coming to me, cap in hand, for the $50,000 they need. It's a sick joke, isn't it? They think that because I have it, I owe it to them. They're just vermin, crawling to the one person they think can solve their mess. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. More of my life, more of my reality, is on the way. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. The San Francisco sky was a uniform gray, and a light drizzle was just starting to fall. I was in the middle of a complex line of code when my phone rang. An annoying buzz on the sleek marble of my desk. I saw my mother's name on the screen, and a wave of irritation washed over me. I let it ring once, twice, a silent protest against the interruption. Then, I answered. Hello? My voice was clipped, a professional distance that I've carefully honed. Oh, darling, finally. I was so worried you wouldn't pick up, she said, her voice laced with the usual saccharine sweetness. How are you? Is everything okay? I ignored the pleasantries. What is it, Mom? I'm busy. A pause, a slight hesitation. It's about the wedding. We've had a bit of a setback. A big one, actually. Your father and I, we lost the money for the party. A man online promised to double our investment in a week, and he just disappeared with it. We've been saving for so long, honey. Her voice cracked, and I could hear a whimper in the background, probably my father. My blood ran cold, not with sympathy, but with contempt. You're kidding me, I said, my voice low and dangerous. You actually fell for that? How could you be so stupid? Please, honey, don't talk like that. We were just trying to get a little extra for a nice party. You know how much we've dreamed of this. A dream? You call it a dream? You're a pair of grown adults who can't even manage $1,000, let alone a life. You are parasites. You've always been parasites, sucking the life out of everything around you. And now you expect me to bail you out? I've worked my whole life to get away from your incompetence, to build something for myself. And you think you can just come crawling back and ask for $50,000? You're vermin, both of you. The line went silent. My own words hung in the air, a poisonous vapor. I hung up. The rain outside turned into a downpour, mirroring the storm inside me. The following days were filled with frantic calls and pleading voicemails from my mother. Her voice, once so full of a gentle love I now saw as weakness, was now desperate, a thin, wavering line of sound that grated on my nerves. I blocked their numbers. I couldn't stand to hear their pathetic pleas. I had built a fortress around my life, brick by brick, and they were the ghosts I had to keep out. My colleagues noticed my cold demeanor. "Everything okay, Lily?" they'd ask, their faces filled with a concern I found utterly baffling. I'd just offer a tight smile and say I was fine, that I was just focused on work. And I was. I poured all my energy into my job, a perfect distraction from the uncomfortable silence I had created. I bought a new watch, a new pair of shoes, anything to fill the void. I went out with friends, laughed at their jokes, and pretended I didn't see the judgment in their eyes when I talked about my parents. I told them a vague lie about a financial disagreement, never admitting the full, ugly truth. I was an actress in my own life, playing the part of a successful, independent woman who had no ties to a world that was so beneath her. But the silence was deafening. Even in my beautiful apartment, surrounded by my expensive things, I could still hear my mother's voice, her last words before I hung up, a plea for help. And I could still see my father's weary face, a lifetime of disappointments etched on it. They were a part of me, a part I tried to erase. But like a ghost, they kept haunting me. A week later, I came home from work to find a small, crumpled envelope slipped under my door. There was no sender's address. Inside, a small handwritten note from my mother. "Lily, we're in the city. Your father is sick. We just want to see you. Please. We're at the motel on 14th Street. It's room 2B. My heart, a lump of ice in my chest, didn't move. They had come to me, to my city, to my territory. It was a violation. The next day, I didn't go to work. I drove to the address she gave me. The motel was a depressing sight, with peeling paint and a sign with half the letters burnt out. It was a place for transients, a place where people's lives were falling apart. I felt a surge of superiority mixed with disgust. I knocked on the door of room 2B. My father, looking much older and thinner than I remembered, opened it. His face was a mask of exhaustion and shame. My mother was sitting on the edge of the bed, her hands clasped together, her face etched with worry. I looked at the small room, the cheap curtains, the stale air, and felt nothing but a powerful sense of victory. "So this is it," I said, my voice cold and hard. "This is what you've become. Beggars." My mother looked up, her eyes pleading. "Lily, your father. He had a heart attack last night. We came here because we couldn't afford a hospital. We thought maybe if we could just see you—" I cut her off. "I told you what I think. I'm not a bank. I'm not a charity. You made your bed, now lie in it. You are vermin. Nothing more." I turned to leave, but my father's weak voice stopped me. "Lily, please. We just need a little help. We're your parents." I didn't turn around. "You stopped being my parents the day you became a burden." I walked out, leaving them there, in that small, ugly room, with their broken hearts and their broken lives. The rain had stopped, and the sun was a pale, watery light in the sky. It felt like a curse. I hope you're hooked. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling me what you think of my story so far. It helps a lot. My fortress, once so impregnable, began to show cracks. The guilt, a slow-acting poison, began to work its way into my system. I was at work, staring at my screen, but all I could see was my father's pale face, the pleading look in his eyes. I tried to focus, but the code I was writing looked like meaningless gibberish. My performance at work began to slip. I was late, I missed deadlines, and my code was riddled with errors. My boss, a shrewd man who saw potential where others saw nothing, called me into his office. "Lily," he said, his voice unusually gentle. "What's going on? This isn't like you. You're usually one of my best. Are you having some kind of personal issues?" I just shook my head. "I'm fine. Just a lot on my plate." I refused to admit the truth, to admit that my carefully constructed world was crumbling. The company had a new project, a high-stakes deal with a major client. I was the lead, but my mind was not on the project. It was on that squalid motel room. I started getting calls from a social worker. I ignored them at first, then I blocked the number. But they were persistent. A letter came, a formal document stating that my parents were in a hospital and that they were asking for me. I tore it up, throwing the pieces in the trash, as if the act of destroying the paper would make the reality go away. One night, I was walking home from work, and I saw a homeless person on the street. For a moment, I saw my father's face. The shock was so profound, I stopped dead in my tracks. A deep, cold fear began to gnaw at me. I was so busy running away from the ghosts of my past, I was turning into them. The day of the big client meeting, I woke up in a cold sweat. The dreams were vivid, relentless. I dreamt of my father's funeral, a small, somber affair in that same dusty Ohio town. There were no flowers, no family, just an empty coffin and a single lonely mourner. Me. I went to work, my hands trembling. The meeting was a disaster. I couldn't concentrate. I mixed up numbers, I spoke in a monotone, and I couldn't answer the simplest questions about the project. The client, a sharp-eyed woman with a no-nonsense attitude, looked at me with open contempt. My boss, his face a grim mask, ended the meeting early. He called me back to his office. "Lily, I'm sorry, but I have to let you go. You're a liability now. This isn't a game. We're talking about millions of dollars here. You've lost your edge." I didn't argue. I didn't try to defend myself. I just nodded, collected my things, and walked out. The San Francisco sky was a bright, cruel blue, a sharp contrast to the gray misery I felt inside. I got in my car and drove, aimlessly, through the city. I ended up at the hospital. I didn't know why. I just knew I had to go there. I found the information desk, my hands shaking as I asked for my parents. The nurse, a kind-faced woman with tired eyes, looked at me with a mixture of pity and confusion. "Are you Lily? Your mother? She's been asking for you every day." I just nodded, unable to speak. She gave me the room number. My legs felt like lead as I walked down the hall, each step a monument to my own self-destruction. I stood outside the hospital room, my hand hovering over the doorknob. The sound of a heart monitor, a steady rhythmic beep, was the only sound I could hear. It was a lifeline, a sign of life, a counterpoint to the death I had so casually wished upon them. I took a deep breath and opened the door. The sight of them hit me like a physical blow. My mother was sitting in a chair next to the bed, holding my father's hand. He was hooked up to machines, his face pale and sunken. He looked like a ghost of the man I had so viciously condemned. My mother looked up, and a gasp escaped her lips. "Lily," she whispered, her voice a mix of disbelief and relief. Tears welled up in her eyes. I just stood there, a statue of stone. I didn't know what to say. The cruel words I had said to them, the ones about being vermin and a burden, echoed in my mind. A horrifying symphony. My father's eyes fluttered open. He looked at me, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the old love, the old hope. Then, a look of profound sadness settled on his face. I knew what he was thinking. He was thinking of the $50,000 of the wedding, of everything they had lost. And for the first time, I felt a stab of genuine, unbearable pain. It was a pain that had nothing to do with my job, my apartment, or my money. It was the pain of a daughter who had betrayed her own blood. I walked over to the bed and took my father's other hand. It was cold and felt unnervingly fragile. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, the words a raw, unfamiliar sound in my throat. My mother began to cry, silent tears streaming down her face. My father just looked at me, his eyes filled with a weary resignation. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the loss of a daughter. And in that moment, I realized I had lost so much more. I had lost my soul. This is a critical point in the story, and the final stretch is coming up. If you've enjoyed it so far, please take a moment to subscribe and like this video. Your support means the world to me and helps the channel grow. Over the next few weeks, I spent every day at the hospital. I didn't talk about the money or the wedding or anything from the past. I just sat there, listening to my mother's stories from their youth, about how my father used to climb the tallest trees just to impress her, how they spent their early days living on love and hope and not much else. My father, slowly recovering, would just squeeze my hand. It was a silent conversation, a dialogue of forgiveness without words. I got a part-time job as a waitress at a diner to make ends meet. It was humiliating at first, but the work was honest and the people were kind. I learned to smile, to ask how people's day was going, to be present. It was a stark contrast to my old life, where I just sat behind a screen, the world a distant, unimportant thing. I learned that true value wasn't in the lines of code I wrote, or the money I had in the bank. It was in the human connection, in the look in my mother's eyes when I brought her a cup of coffee, in the slow, hopeful smile on my father's face when he saw me walk into the room. My parents, in their own way, had given me something that all my money and ambition couldn't buy. They had given me a second chance, a way to rebuild not my financial empire, but my own broken self. My father was finally released from the hospital. He was weaker, but his spirit was not broken. He had a new purpose, and so did I. We found a small, cheap apartment, and I helped them move in. It was a world away from my old apartment, but it was a home. I had a new job as a freelance developer, and I was slowly building a new, more ethical career. I was no longer a shark, but a person. I was learning to be a daughter again, a friend, a human being. The $50,000 for the wedding was a distant, painful memory, but a new dream was taking its place. My parents decided to have a small, quiet celebration. We invited a few old friends, and my parents renewed their vows in a small local church. My mother wore a simple dress, and my father a cheap suit. I was their only witness. My mother and I held hands. My father gave me a small, knowing smile. He knew that I was a vermin no more. The rain fell outside, but inside, the sun was shining. The small wedding was more beautiful than any extravagant party could have ever been. It was a celebration not of wealth, but of love, forgiveness, and a family that was finally whole again. Years have passed. I no longer live in a luxurious apartment or drive an expensive car. I have a small house in a quiet neighborhood, a few blocks from my parents. My mother is frail now, her hair completely gray, and my father's hands are a bit more shaky. But they are happy. The consequences of my past actions are still very much a part of my life. I never regained my old job, my old salary, or my old status. The financial security I so ruthlessly pursued is gone. But in its place, I have something more valuable. I have a family. I have a home. My father passed away peacefully last night. My mother and I were with him, holding his hands. I cried, but my tears were not of sorrow. They were tears of gratitude, for giving me a second chance, for forgiving me, for teaching me that money is a poor substitute for love. The day of the funeral, my mother and I stood alone by his grave. My mother, looking at the small wooden cross, said, "He was so proud of you, Lily. He knew you were not a vermin. You were his daughter." I looked at the simple headstone. My parents needed $50,000 for their wedding. The title of the story of my life, a constant reminder of my failures and my redemption. I no longer call my parents vermin. I call them my family. And in the end, that's the only title that truly matters. And that's the end of my story. I hope it resonated with you and reminded you of the things that truly matter. If it did, please consider subscribing to the channel and sharing this video. Thank you for watching.